Imagine living in a world where the very things that make you feel free are the same things that quietly enslave you. A world where comfort, pleasure, and convenience are not tools for happiness, but mechanisms of control. Think about it. How often do we chase what feels good, only to end up feeling empty afterward? How often do we confuse the ability to choose between 1,000 distractions with true freedom of the mind? Today, we're going to explore a truth that Aldous Huxley saw long before the rest of the world caught up, that the pursuit of endless pleasure, disguised as freedom, has become the most sophisticated form of slavery. Stay with me until the end, because the final insight I'll share may completely change how you understand freedom itself. But before we begin, make sure to subscribe, leave a like, and share this video with someone who loves exploring the deeper layers of human existence. Comment below what freedom means to you, because by the end of this video, your definition might never be the same again. Now, let's begin. When Aldous Huxley wrote Brave New World, he wasn't merely imagining a futuristic dystopia. He was warning us about a spiritual and psychological evolution, one where humanity would trade meaning for pleasure, depth for comfort, and truth for entertainment. He saw a future where people would be so consumed by what feels good that they'd lose the ability to question what is real, and perhaps that future isn't so distant anymore. Look around. We live in an age of abundance, where our desires are met faster than our minds can process them. Food, sex, entertainment, information, everything is at our fingertips. And yet, paradoxically, the easier life becomes, the more restless we feel. Why? Because the human spirit was not designed to live in constant stimulation. True fulfillment does not come from ease, but from meaning. Huxley believed that the danger of modern civilization was not tyranny by force, but tyranny through pleasure. A world where control no longer requires violence, only seduction. Instead of chains, we are bound by comfort. Instead of censorship, we are silenced by distraction. The tragedy is not that people are oppressed, but that they have stopped caring about what truly matters. Psychologist Viktor Frankl once said that when a person cannot find meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure. This is perhaps one of the most accurate descriptions of modern life. We mistake stimulation for joy and convenience for progress. We believe that being able to choose between 10 streaming services, 100 restaurants, or 1,000 brands means we are free. But what kind of freedom is that, if we cannot choose where to direct our attention or what to value beyond the next dopamine hit? Think about your own habits for a moment. How often do you reach for your phone, not because you need to, but because the silence feels unbearable? How often do you scroll, not out of curiosity, but out of compulsion? The modern mind has become addicted to distraction, and distraction is the perfect tool for control. Because a distracted mind does not question, and a mind that does not question is easily manipulated. Aldous Huxley predicted that pleasure would become the new mechanism of social order, that we would come to love our servitude. He saw that freedom would no longer be taken away from us, but gently replaced with entertainment. And the scariest part is how natural this transition feels. When control feels good, who would ever want to resist it? Philosopher Erich Fromm described something similar in Escape from Freedom. He explained that people often flee from freedom because it brings responsibility. Real freedom requires awareness, choice, and courage. But in the modern world, pleasure gives us the illusion of freedom without the burden of responsibility. It tells us, you can do whatever you want, but quietly decides for us what we want to do. The algorithms that shape our desires, the advertisements that tell us what happiness looks like, the endless pursuit of more, all create a system where pleasure becomes a substitute for purpose. We live inside an invisible cage built from our own appetites, and the bars are made not of iron but of desire. The question is, can we ever escape this? Can we reclaim freedom when pleasure itself has become our prison? We'll explore that in the next segment, as we dive deeper into how society, technology, and the human mind cooperate in building this invisible trap, and more importantly, how awareness can break it, because understanding the mechanism is the first step toward liberation. If Huxley were alive today, he would likely recognize our world instantly, not because of flying cars or technological marvels, but because of the psychological architecture of modern society. He would see that his brave new world has already materialized, not through oppression but through the engineering of desire. We are not forced to obey, we are seduced into compliance. Think about how this works. Every app, every commercial, every digital interaction is designed to offer a tiny reward, a like, a notification, a flash of novelty. These are the modern equivalents of Huxley's fictional drug soma, the perfect anesthetic for discomfort. In Brave New World, people used soma to escape pain and anxiety. Today we have endless screens, entertainment, and consumption. Different substance, same function, the erasure of thought through pleasure. Neuroscience confirms this. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter of anticipation and reward, floods our brain not when we achieve something, but when we expect to. That's why the cycle of scrolling, shopping, and chasing never ends. We're wired to crave, not to be satisfied. The system thrives on our constant dissatisfaction because that dissatisfaction keeps us engaged, obedient, and predictable. But why do we fall for it so easily? Because comfort feels safe, pleasure feels like peace. And when life is filled with both, we stop questioning. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche once warned, "The surest way to corrupt a youth is to instruct him to hold in higher esteem those who think alike than those who think differently." That corruption is now global. The modern world does not punish rebellion. It prevents it by drowning the mind in distractions. Our schools, our entertainment, even our conversations are increasingly structured around consumption rather than contemplation. The goal is no longer to understand, but to react, instantly, emotionally, superficially. The digital age has given us access to infinite information, yet it has never been harder to find truth, because truth demands silence, patience, and inner space, all of which the pleasure-driven mind finds unbearable. Consider this: true freedom begins in the ability to be still, to sit in silence without reaching for a device, a drink, or a distraction, to observe your own thoughts without being consumed by them. But in a culture built on constant stimulation, stillness feels like death. That is how far we've drifted. We fear silence more than noise, depth more than surface, reflection more than reaction. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who studied the state of flow, said that deep engagement is the true source of happiness, not pleasure, but presence. Yet presence is exactly what we are losing. We've replaced mindful focus with fragmented attention, and this fragmentation doesn't just weaken our minds, it weakens our autonomy. A distracted mind cannot choose freely. It is led by impulse, not intention. Let's pause and reflect on something important. If pleasure is the bait, then attention is the hook. Whoever controls your attention controls your reality. And in the digital age, your attention is the most valuable resource on earth. Corporations, media platforms, and even political movements compete not for your money but for your gaze. Because once they have your gaze, they shape your beliefs, your emotions, and ultimately, your identity. Huxley understood that manipulation doesn't need to feel oppressive. It can feel exciting, liberating, even pleasurable, and that's what makes it so dangerous. When control is disguised as choice, slavery feels like freedom. You don't rebel against what delights you. You embrace it. And this is the essence of the pleasure trap, to make you love the very system that enslaves your mind. Now let's go deeper. The human brain evolved in a world of scarcity, of food, social approval, and information. Pleasure was a signal that something was good for survival. But in a world of abundance, that same system becomes destructive. We are bombarded with more stimuli than any human nervous system was designed to handle. And the result: chronic anxiety, depression, and a hollow sense of meaninglessness. The philosopher Alan Watts once said, "If you get the message, hang up the phone." In other words, when pleasure serves its purpose, when it signals growth, connection, or creativity, it's beautiful. But when it becomes an end in itself, it turns toxic. We stay on the line long after the message is gone, addicted to the signal, rather than the truth it once carried. Ask yourself, are you using pleasure as a path to fulfillment or as an escape from yourself? Are you pursuing experiences that expand your consciousness or ones that numb it? These are uncomfortable questions, but they are also the doorway to awareness. Because once you see the trap, you can no longer walk into it unconsciously. By now you may be wondering, is pleasure always the enemy? The answer is no. Pleasure is not the problem. Dependence is. The issue arises when our happiness depends on external stimulation. True freedom is not the absence of pleasure, but the ability to choose it consciously, to enjoy it without being controlled by it. In the next part, we will explore how society's structures, education, media, and technology actively cultivate dependence on pleasure as a means of social stability. We'll see how Huxley's prophecy was not a warning ignored, but a blueprint fulfilled, and how understanding this mechanism gives us the power to reverse it. Stay with me, because what comes next will challenge not only what you think you know about freedom, but also how you live it. When Aldous Huxley imagined a world governed not by fear but by indulgence, he foresaw a subtle, almost invisible tyranny, one that would not require violence to maintain order. He understood that the most efficient form of control is not suppression, but seduction. The ideal citizen of such a world is not the obedient worker forced into submission, but the happy consumer convinced that submission is freedom. In our modern age, that vision has come to life through systems so elegantly designed that most of us never notice them. Education teaches conformity under the guise of success. Media offers distraction dressed as connection. Technology promises empowerment, yet captures us in endless cycles of dependency. Every structure of society seems built around one central idea: keep the human being entertained, and you will keep him docile. Think about it. The average person spends more time looking at screens than into another human's eyes. Our devices are not just tools. They are extensions of our nervous systems. They have redefined how we think, feel, and relate. We measure our worth by likes, our intelligence by trends, our happiness by algorithms. We are no longer living for experience but for validation, a digital applause that disappears as quickly as it appears. And yet, we defend these systems passionately. Why? Because they make us feel good. Because they give us tiny doses of control in a world that feels overwhelmingly complex. Because they whisper the same comforting lie: that freedom means the ability to choose among infinite pleasures. But true freedom has nothing to do with how many options you have. It has everything to do with how deeply you understand the choices you make. Sociologist Neil Postman once said that we are amusing ourselves to death. He wasn't exaggerating. The modern human being is slowly trading depth for dopamine, purpose for pleasure. We are becoming experts at being entertained and amateurs at being alive. And perhaps that's the cruelest part of this illusion. It doesn't feel like oppression. It feels like progress. Consider how the system perpetuates itself. The economy thrives on dissatisfaction. Marketing doesn't sell products, it sells identities. It tells you who you could be if only you bought this, wore that, traveled there. Every advertisement carries the same hidden message: you are not enough, but you could be. And we listen, not because we are foolish, but because that message taps into the most ancient wound of all, the fear of inadequacy. Psychologist Carl Jung spoke of the collective shadow, the parts of humanity we deny, repress, or ignore. In our pursuit of constant pleasure, we've denied our shadow completely. We've replaced self-confrontation with self-distraction. We run from discomfort, not realizing that discomfort is the birthplace of growth. Every spiritual tradition, from Buddhism to Stoicism, teaches that liberation begins not in indulgence but in awareness, the courage to sit with pain, confusion, and emptiness without escaping. But modern society teaches the opposite. It tells us that discomfort is a malfunction to be fixed, not a message to be understood. So we medicate sadness, we anesthetize boredom, we disguise loneliness as independence. And in doing so, we lose the ability to experience life as it is, raw, unpredictable, beautiful, and real. Ask yourself, when was the last time you felt truly alive without needing anything external to make it so? When was the last time you were fully present in silence, not out of obligation, but because you desired it? These questions reveal the depth of our conditioning. We have been trained to believe that happiness is something to be consumed, not cultivated. But consumption can only fill the body, never the soul. Huxley's genius was not just in predicting the rise of mass distraction, but in understanding why it would work. He knew that pleasure is a far more persuasive weapon than pain. People will rebel against suffering, but they will surrender to pleasure, especially when that pleasure promises to erase their suffering. And that is precisely how the pleasure trap maintains itself. It sells comfort as liberation, when in truth it is captivity with a smile. In Brave New World, the ruling elite used pleasure not merely to control individuals, but to stabilize the entire social order. A population absorbed in entertainment does not question authority. It questions only the quality of its entertainment. Similarly, our modern crises, ecological, political, spiritual, persist not because we lack awareness, but because awareness demands discomfort. And discomfort, in a pleasure-addicted world, is the ultimate taboo. Philosopher Herbert Marcuse once described this phenomenon as repressive desublimation, the process by which liberation itself becomes a tool of control. The system encourages you to indulge every desire, to express every impulse, to be yourself. But that freedom is carefully contained within the boundaries of consumerism. You are free to buy anything, believe anything, watch anything, as long as you do not awaken to the machinery that dictates those choices. The moment you awaken, you see the trap for what it is. A world that mistakes comfort for happiness and choice for freedom. A world where we've traded the richness of inner life for the glitter of external gratification. And yet, not all is lost. Because awareness is the first crack in the illusion. Once you see the pattern, it begins to lose its power. The pleasure trap cannot enslave the mind that observes it. Awareness disrupts the cycle, and within that disruption lies the seed of true freedom. In the next and final part, we'll uncover the path out of this psychological maze, how to live with pleasure without being ruled by it, how to reclaim your mind in a world built to seduce it, and how to experience freedom not as an idea, but as a state of being. The last revelation, the most powerful of all, may change not just how you see the world, but how you live in it. There comes a moment when every illusion begins to fracture, when the pleasures that once thrilled you begin to feel hollow, when the distractions that once protected you start to feel suffocating. That moment, painful as it may be, is the beginning of awakening, because it is only when pleasure loses its power to numb that truth can begin to speak. The trap was never pleasure itself. The trap was the belief that pleasure is the purpose of life. Huxley tried to show us that a society built on stimulation alone becomes spiritually starved. And that starvation is visible everywhere, in our anxiety, in our loneliness, in our endless scrolling for meaning. We've become experts at escaping ourselves, yet strangers to our own inner worlds. But liberation begins exactly there, in the confrontation with our own emptiness. True freedom, Huxley would argue, does not lie in the ability to satisfy every desire, but in the strength to observe desire without being enslaved by it. It is the freedom to say no, not out of repression but out of awareness. It is the freedom to choose meaning over impulse, stillness over noise, truth over comfort. This is not an easy path. The world will not support your awakening. It will tempt you, flatter you, distract you, anything to keep you asleep. But every great philosopher, mystic, and psychologist has said the same thing in different words, that awakening requires the courage to step outside the collective trance. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus taught that freedom is not found in controlling what happens to us, but in mastering how we respond. Viktor Frankl, who survived the horrors of concentration camps, discovered that even in the most extreme conditions, the ultimate freedom remains, the freedom to choose one's attitude. Huxley's insight aligns perfectly with theirs, that true liberation begins not in the world, but in the mind. So how do we break free from the pleasure trap? Not by renouncing pleasure, but by reordering it. Pleasure must serve life, not rule it. It should follow purpose, not replace it. When pleasure becomes an expression of joy, creativity, love, or connection, it enriches us. But when it becomes a way to escape reality, it consumes us. The first step toward liberation is awareness. To observe your habits without judgment. Notice the moments when you seek stimulation, not from joy but from restlessness. Awareness interrupts the automatic pattern, and that interruption creates space. In that space, choice is born. The second step is discipline, not the kind that punishes, but the kind that protects. Discipline is the art of choosing what truly matters, again and again, even when the world offers 1,000 easier options. It is not about deprivation, it is about devotion. Devotion to your own clarity, your own aliveness, your own consciousness. And the third step is meaning. Meaning is what transforms experience into growth. It is what turns suffering into wisdom and pleasure into gratitude. Without meaning, even the most pleasurable life feels empty. With meaning, even hardship becomes sacred. Huxley once said, "Experience is not what happens to a man, it is what a man does with what happens to him." The world will continue to seduce you with new desires, new distractions, new illusions of freedom. But what you do with those experiences, how you transform them into understanding, determines whether you remain a captive or become free. To live freely in a world addicted to pleasure requires a new kind of rebellion, one that begins within. It is the rebellion of awareness in a culture of sleep, of presence in a culture of distraction, of authenticity in a culture of performance. It means daring to live with simplicity, to rediscover joy in silence, and to choose truth even when it hurts. Imagine, just for a moment, what life would feel like if you no longer needed constant stimulation. Imagine feeling peace in stillness, strength in solitude, fulfillment in simplicity. That is real freedom, the kind no system can take from you because it does not depend on anything external. It arises from within, from a consciousness no pleasure can corrupt. And here lies the final and most powerful revelation. Pleasure becomes divine only when it is rooted in awareness. When you are fully present, even the smallest joys, a breath, a sunrise, a conversation, become infinitely richer than all artificial stimulation combined, because awareness transforms pleasure from a trap into a tool, from slavery into celebration. Huxley's warning, therefore, was not a prophecy of doom, but an invitation to awaken, to remember, to reclaim our humanity in a world that has forgotten what it means to be alive. He challenged us to look beyond the glitter of comfort and rediscover the radiance of consciousness. So if you take one thing from this message, let it be this: freedom is not the power to indulge every impulse. Freedom is the power to be fully conscious of each one and to choose wisely. And maybe, just maybe, that's the freedom Huxley hoped we would one day find. The freedom not from the world, but from the illusions that bind us to it. If this message spoke to you, take a moment to reflect before you return to the noise of everyday life. Share it with someone who, like you, is searching for something deeper than pleasure, someone who is ready to awaken, because the world doesn't need more consumers of pleasure. It needs more creators of meaning. Thanks for looking.